Picture yourself in a small barracks module drifting in low orbit. The only sounds are soft air systems, muted engines, and the faint metallic settling of a ship. Nothing is happening. Nothing is expected of you. Tonight's military sci-fi tale unfolds with that same slow, steady rhythm, easy to follow, easy to fall asleep to. The night has taken on a soft, tactical calm. Our story begins within that atmosphere, slow, grounded, steady. Let's enter it. I do not know if this will ever be played back. The recording timer says I have 41 minutes of oxygen at current draw. That assumes the scrubbers do not clog again. It assumes the cracks in my chest plate stay hairline and do not widen with the next aftershock. It assumes there is a next aftershock and a next, until the rods are finished falling and the planet stops shaking like a fevered animal. I am Elias Rourke, 3rd breach-escort, Kepri 9, Planetary Defense. This is my account of Grid Delta 7's fall and the partial preservation of Registry Vault 12. The suit tells me my lower body is present, but I do not feel it. When I glance down, all I see is shattered ferrocrete, twisted rebar, and the rough, chipped curve of the data vault pressed against my right flank. Somewhere under the rubble, my legs exist as pulped matter and composite splinters, but that is an anatomical fact, not a sensation. The painkillers and shock have washed that away. What remains is the weight of the debris on my hips, the way each shallow breath grinds my ribs, and the taste of iron and dust in my mouth. The vault is silent. Its systems are in low-power lockdown, but its maintenance port accepted my suit's hardline jack. That means the core is intact. Its armored shell did its job better than my exosuit did mine. We were tasked with escorting it. We did that mostly. The rest is noise and broken stone. I start at the beginning because that is what after-action protocol demands, and habit is stronger than fear. The shift began in the usual twilight. Down in the trench cities of Kepri 9, there is no natural day or night, only cycling levels of industrial illumination. On Grid Delta 7, it was maintenance dim. Overhead, strip lights flickered a dull amber along the spine of Corridor F-13, throwing the exposed conduit and patchwork plating into a sickly glow. The air tasted like always, recycled, tinged with solvent vapor, carrying the faint metallic tang of corrosion. My squad was 8 strong then. 8 suits, 8 heat signatures, 8 overlapping fields of fire, moving in paired files around the slow, steady bulk of Registry Vault 12. The vault walked on 4 jointed legs, each foot cup gripping the grit-slick floor with hydraulic certainty. Every step made a faint, precise thump through the soles of my boots, transmitted through steel and stone as much as through air. The vault carried the identity of everyone in Delta 7. Birth records, residency permits, criminal files, medical histories, deployment rosters, promotion chains, disciplinary actions, all of it compressed into lattice and shielded behind case-hardened composite thicker than my chest plate. To most people, it was paperwork in a box. To Orbital Command, it was a node in the data mesh that kept the war machine coordinated and the civilian population legible. To the Synodic Choir, it would be a map and a key. We had orders not to let them take it. If that meant destroying it, there were thermite charges in its belly designed exactly for that. Command preferred relocation. The vaults cost resources and time to fabricate. People could be conscripted. Infrastructure could be rebuilt. Secure registry cores were rarer. We were moving it from Spine 12's registry hub down to a secondary shaft mouth, 2 levels below primary evacuation. The story from Command was that the upper spines were compromised, surface breaches too frequent, main evac lines at risk. The shaft at Delta 7 sub was buried deeper, hidden in maintenance schematics, shielded by tons of rock. I believed it. You always believe it until you have a reason not to. The alternative is paralysis. The first hint that this was not a standard relocation came from the comms haze. Even with synodic interference, local bands are usually clear. Short range, line of sight, piggybacked on our suit's mesh network. That morning, the command feed sounded like a fractured chorus. Overlapping orders, clipped status reports, bursts of static. Notifications for unit IDs I did not recognize. Casualty codes for grid squares outside our sector. Requests for orbital fire redirected mid-sentence. No overarching picture, only fragments. I filtered most of it out. At squad level, the only voice that mattered was my own, and the icons in my visor that represented my people and the vault. 8 blue glyphs and 1 heavy white square moving through a tangled wireframe of corridors and shafts. The route took us along F-113, across a transverse hallway, then down a ramp to a maintenance deck that had been converted into a temporary passage. The floor vibrated faintly underfoot, the way it always did when the surface smelters cycled or the deep pumps kicked in. On Kepri 9, the planet never felt still. It thrummed with mechanical activity, with the breathing of a world being hollowed. 7 minutes into the march, the planet's heartbeat changed. The tremor rolled through the corridor in a low, subsonic wave that my suit registered before my ears did. Icons on my UD spiked and flattened. Tiny motes of dust shook loose from the overhead braces, drifting down in lazy spirals. The vault paused mid-step to compensate, stabilizers widening its stance, legs flexing. Surface strike. The suit's threat subroutine annotated, vectoring lines of extrapolation up through the rock. Impact magnitude exceeded smelter cycles by several orders. That meant someone in orbit had dropped something heavy. Whether it was human or synodic mass, I could not tell. The choir had learned to use our own debris fields against us. When enough metal is falling from the sky, authorship becomes academic. I logged the tremor and signaled the squad to tighten spacing. 8 suit icons pulled closer around the vault. The corridor narrowed ahead, and the walls began to sweat. We were passing a seam where the trench city's ferrocrete met raw rock. Years of micron-level erosion from the corrosive atmosphere had opened hairline cracks. Condensation seeped through them as a thin sheen of chemically polluted moisture. Drops fell intermittently, sizzling faintly when they hit exposed metal. I washed the moisture because tunnels on Kepri 9 do not fail cleanly. First comes the sweat, then the trickle. Then, if the rock is overcut or the supports are tired, the flood and the collapse. In a war zone, collapse is not always geological. It is often guided, excavated. The choir's tunneling constructs like to follow the paths of least resistance. The second tremor arrived as we reached the midpoint of the seam. This one was sharper, closer. The floor flexed under the vault's weight, the sound of grinding stones swelling in my bone conduction pickups. A status glyph for maglev line. 12 flickered red on my HUD, indicating a sudden loss of power and structural integrity somewhere below. That was when the floor vanished. There was no gradual cracking, no cinematic fissure creeping along the corridor. One moment, F-113 was solid under my boots. The next, it became a cloud of pulverized ferrocrete and rebar fragments accelerated upward by something large and violent erupting from beneath. My suit's inertial sensors screamed. The world inverted. I saw the vault's bulk tilt, one pair of legs slipping into sudden emptiness, the other clawing at crumbling edges. I saw 2 of my squad icons spike into gray as their suits went offline in the first fraction of a second. The tunneler breached through the remains of the floor, a cylindrical mass of segmented armor, auger teeth, and cutting fields. It took up the entire width of the corridor, its forward third already above the level we had been walking on. Shards of shattered rebar skittered off its plating as it rose. The thing did not roar. It emitted the grinding shriek of stone being atomized and the monotonous hum of powerful field generators. My suit threw me backward automatically, servos flaring, anchors digging into whatever purchase they could find. I landed hard against the inner wall, armor ringing. Dust turned the air into fog. My visor compensated, filters shifting to outline mode. The tunneler blossomed into a bright, pulsing wireframe bracketed in red. I did not issue orders. There was no time. Breach doctrine was drilled into us until it became reflex. Those who had not fallen launched anchor grapnels into the tunnel's edges, hauling themselves clear of the new void. Coil accelerator rifles snapped to firing position, slugs impacting in tight patterns at the segments where sensor and joint clusters were statistically probable. The tunnel construct reacted by extending peripheral blades and micro-drone pods, spraying the corridor with secondary threats. One of those blades caught Sergeant Mihal's suit mid-torso, lifting him from the floor and pinning him against the ceiling before crumpling him like an empty ration packet. His icon went black. Sparks fell with him. The vault slid. For a second it balanced on the lip of the breach, two legs scrabbling for purchase, the other two absorbed by the collapse. Servos whined at the edge of audibility. Then its right foreleg hydraulics blew out, a jet of fluid atomizing into the dust. It tipped toward the hole. Tactical priorities shifted in a heartbeat. The tunneler was lethal, but if the vault fell into its jaws, the mission ended, and all that followed would be cleanup and sterility. I fired grapnels past the construct, into the far lip of the breach, using the exosuit's full assist to yank my bulk into the void's edge. My boots skidded on debris. I hit the vault's sloping flank sideways, mag clamps engaging with a solid thunk. Warning glyphs flashed as the construct's cutting fields grazed my left leg, stripping outer plate, but the layer underneath held. I triggered the suit's auxiliary anchors, sending 2 more lines into the intact flooring behind me. Their barbs bit into ferrocrete, cables going taut. For a moment, my entire world reduced to tension calculations. Suit actuators straining, the vault's mass pulling downward, the anchor's HUD indicators hovering just below critical load. The rest of the squad mirrored the maneuver where they could. 4 suits remained functional, not counting Mihal and the 2 who had dropped straight into the tunneler's maw when the floor gave out. Anchor lines crisscrossed the air. The vault jerked, stopped, shifted. Its remaining good legs scrabbled blindly, then found purchase on the far lip, claws digging in. The construct seemed to realize its prey was escaping. It surged upward, bringing its mass into full contact with the vault's underside and the tangle of cables. My anchor screamed in the suit's haptic feedback, a keening vibration transmitted directly into my bones. A second later, 2 of them snapped in a cascading failure, the recoil yanking me forward. The vault slid another meter. Its bulk collided with the construct's housing, scraping armor against armor, sending a high, grating shudder through my teeth. Then its forward legs found solid ground on the far side. With a final, straining lurch, it dragged itself clear of the breach. The tunneler, denied the prize, continued its emergence, filling the corridor behind the vault. Defensive turrets along its flanks spat cutting beams and fragmenting projectiles. The squad fell back, firing in controlled bursts, targeting seams and sensor nodes, using the vault as partial cover. The construct's armor deformed under the sustained assault, but it did not stop. It never stops until its job is done or its core is destroyed. We did not stay to finish it. That was not our function. Breach doctrine again. Prioritize the payload. Avoid decisive engagement with heavy assets when outgunned. Withdraw to secondary route. We limped away from the collapsing corridor, leaving the tunneler still scraping and screeching beneath the damaged floor. The vault walked on 3 functioning legs and 1 dragging stump, movements jerky, forced. Its speed dropped by 40%. My suit's diagnostic linked to its status feed, multiple actuator failures, casing stress at 37%, gyros compensating near their limits. We had spent the first of our bodies, and in return, we gained a crippled payload and an open wound in the city. 3 squad icons remained besides my own, 4 out of 8. The corridor behind us was now a churned ruin, unusable. Our planned route to the shaft mouth was gone. I requested alternate pathing from command. The comms mesh replied with static and overlapping, delayed acknowledgments. Somewhere far above, people were trying to juggle a dozen grid collapses at once. We were a small, moving square of white and blue in a storm of red. When the reply came, it was two conflicting route updates, time-stamped within seconds of each other. One told us to cut left toward a higher-level transit tube. The other directed us down and toward Maglev Line 12's maintenance galleries. I chose down and left. Up meant closer to the surface in the storms. Down meant more rock overhead, more buffer between us and whatever mass drivers were falling. It also meant we would be operating adjacent to a compromised maglev line, but most things on Kepri 9 were compromised now. You choose your poison. The maintenance galleries were narrow, low-ceilinged, and slick. Condensation here was not a film on the walls. It accumulated in shallow pools on the floor, mixing with lubricants and mineral dust to form a viscous, corrosive sludge. The vault's feet sank into it up to the ankle with each step. My suit's boots hissed quietly. Chemical hazard glyphs pulsed at the edge of my vision, promising accelerated degradation if we stayed too long. We passed the access hatch to Maglev 12 itself. Through a jagged rent in the bulkhead, I saw the line as a dark, flooded trench, water lapping against the edges of the tracks. In the beam of my suit's shoulder light, bits of floating debris glinted, polymer seats, torn clothing. Something that might have been an arm before the water and the chemicals smoothed it down to pale shapes. Movement rippled beneath the surface. I shut the hatch and marked the line as hostile. The first friendly fire incident happened 3 corridors later. Our suits picked up incoming trajectories a split second before they hit, extrapolating from pressure waves and the thin whine of shells cutting air. The corridor's far end bloomed into a pressure wave of fire, smoke, and fragmenting metal. Shock waves hammered our armor. The vault staggered, pelted with shrapnel that sparked against its casing. Human artillery. Its signature pattern was familiar. Short, savage bursts, high fragmentation, optimized for shredding unarmored clusters in confined spaces. The kind we normally called in on cyanotic breaches like the one that had just torn F-Worth 13 apart. The fire mission was not targeted at us specifically. It had been plotted against a grid reference. On a tactical display in some half-intact command bunker, someone saw a concentration of red heat signatures and authorized suppression. They lacked our real-time mesh feed. They did not see the white square of the vault and the blue glyphs around it. We hugged the walls and waited out the barrage. 2 more volleys slammed into the transverse corridor ahead, ripping away plating, exposing structural ribs. Shrapnel pattered against my helmet, a muted hail. One spike punched through a weak point where my left pauldron met the neck seal, embedding shallowly in the underlying weave. Suit diagnostics flagged it as non-critical. When the barrage ended, the corridor beyond was unrecognizable. The floor dipped where blasts had hollowed out sections. Wiring and torn ductwork dangled like entrails. Smoke hung in layers, lit by the stuttering emergency lights. A familiar copper smell mixed with the harsher tang of explosives. We moved through it anyway. There was no other route. Corpses lay scattered across the floor, not cyanotic drones, human infantry. Their armor belonged to a neighboring unit, identifiable by the faded insignia on their chest plates. They had died holding a barricade that no longer existed, their cover atomized by the shells. Some lay in positions that suggested they had been facing the same direction from which the artillery came. I stepped over them carefully. My suit's sensors tagged their IDs, added their biometrics to the casualty lists if the comms mesh ever carried the data upward. It was rote, automatic, like logging the replacement of a damaged actuator. We do not stop for the dead in active corridors. The vault's feet splashed through pooled blood and water. Its weight did not pause or hesitate. It had no programming for reverence. We turned another corner and found what the dead had been trying to protect. The first vault column had not made it far. Registry vault. 9 lay on its side against the far wall, legs twisted beneath it like broken limbs. Its casing was split open along one flank where something heavy and precise had cut through. The interior glowed faintly with residual heat. The latticed core that had held the data was gone. In its place, a hollow cavity and scorched mounting rails. Around it, the walls were melted smooth, the floor glazed. Slag gleamed where metal and stone had been turned liquid and then refrozen. The pattern was unmistakable, a synodic harvest site. Their heavy disassemblers had been here, working with the detached, thorough focus the machines applied to everything. I logged the scene, set a local hazard marker, and moved on. There was nothing we could do for Vault 9 or its escort. Their failure just underlined the cost of ours. Somewhere above us, the surface strikes intensified. I felt them through the rock as deeper, heavier impacts, each one accompanied by microfractures. My suit's sensors translated into subtle changes in the corridor's resonant frequencies. The planet had begun to sing a different song, a flatter, more terminal tone. The comms feed, which had been a background hiss of partial messages, suddenly sharpened. A priority broadcast cut through jamming and noise alike, forcing itself into my audio channel and overlaying my HUD with its stark content. There was no voice, only text and a simple tone. Sterilization of grid Delta 7 authorized. Expected impact window, T-minus 32 minutes. All friendly units, execute Emergency Protocol 9. Protocol 9 meant two things: deny the enemy access to sensitive infrastructure and data. Withdraw from the sterilization grid if possible. If not possible, ensure that nothing useful remained. The rods would fall high density and fast. They would not care about friend or foe. The orbital targeting solution could not see us individually, only our grid square. The decision had been made with incomplete data and an urgent need to simplify a chaotic battle space. I looked at the timer. 32 minutes. That was the life expectancy of anything breathing air in Delta 7, plus or minus error margins. I did mental math. Distance to shaft Delta 7 sub, as originally planned. The Vault's reduced speed, the degraded terrain, the likelihood of additional synodic interference, the probability of a secondary collapse along the maglev galleries. Even if we moved without contact, we would be lucky to reach the shaft with 10 minutes to spare. If the shaft itself had not already been compromised by tunneling or strikes, if the access control system still recognized our clearance codes, if the Vault's damaged leg did not fail completely. The numbers did not argue for success. They rarely do at this stage of a campaign. I did not share the timer with the squad. They had access to their own feeds and could see it if they wanted. Most frontliners do not check. They focus on the meter in front of them. That is enough. Instead of running straight for the shaft, I reconsidered our destination. Sterilization grids are plotted on mapped infrastructure, but not every tunnel is on the map. Maintenance runs and abandoned service shafts cut deeper and stranger paths through the rock. Some of them are old, pre-war. Some are newer, carved out for utilities and then forgotten. They are not guaranteed safety, but they are unpredictability, and unpredictability is sometimes the only defense against a precision strike. I pulled up old schematics cached in the suit's memory. They flickered at the edges of my visor, lines faint and incomplete, as if someone had half erased them. One sublayer stood out, an emergency venting shaft below Delta 7's main drainage system. Marked as inactive, sealed, structurally questionable. Uninteresting to both command and the choir. Its mouth lay 2 levels below our current route, offset from shaft Delta 7 sub by a few hundred meters. If we could get the Vault into that shaft, wedge it below the predicted depth of the kinetic penetrators, the odds of it surviving increased. Extraction afterward would be inconvenient. Inconvenience was not my concern. I plotted a new path. It meant leaving the mapped maintenance gallery for a narrower, unlit corridor whose only annotation was a 30-year-old note about subsidence risk. It meant trusting rock that had already been overcut and supported by old struts. It meant trading ideological safety for practical obscurity. I flagged the route update on the squad net. No one questioned it. No one had breath to spare for questions. We turned into the dark. The unlit corridor ate the light from our suits' beams. The walls were raw rock, not ferrocrete. Decades of moisture had left mineral stains like dried tears. The ceiling sagged in places, supported by rusting steel arches driven into the stone. Water dripped steadily from unseen cracks, forming uneven puddles that reflected our lights in broken patterns. The vault's feet sank ankle-deep into mud and scree. Fine dust plumed with each step, hanging in the air until our circulators fouled and filters whined. I watched the timer tick down. 25 minutes. 8 minutes later, the choir found us again. The first indication was not a contact icon, but a note in the rock. A low thrum, almost too faint to notice, made visible as a ripple in the suit's structural stress readouts. It came from below and ahead, not the direction of the surface rods. The choir's tunneling constructs had already done their work close to the main grids. Here, deeper and off route, they had only begun to probe. The sound we felt was not a full breaching cylinder, but smaller harvester drones moving through existing fissures, following vibrations and heat. They emerged in the corridor ahead in a series of quiet, surgical intrusions. The rock bulged gently in 3 places along the left wall, then split open along hairline cracks, extruding smooth, segmented forms the size of large dogs. Their surfaces were matte, absorptive, minimizing reflections. Arrays of optical and non-optical sensors littered their forward segments, blinking in faint patterns as they resolved our signatures. The suit tagged them as scout harvesters. Fast, lightly armored, equipped with cutting tools and sampling mandibles. Alone, they were nuisance threats. In numbers, supported by reinforcements, they became the front edge of a wave. We did not have time for a wave. I advanced to the front of the formation, put myself between the vault and the scouts, and opened fire with methodical precision. There is a way to shoot in confined spaces that minimizes ricochet risk and maximizes structural stability. You aim for sensor clusters, joint articulations, and central processing housings, not center of mass. The coilgun's report became a steady thud, matched by the impact of slugs on composite shells. The scouts reacted with programmed efficiency. The first volley shredded 3 of them, their segments collapsing into twitching heaps. The survivors flattened against the walls, extruding manipulator arms and thin cutting beams that traced white lines across the floor and lower walls, probing for vulnerabilities. The squad joined in, staggered fire preventing overheat. Our rounds walked down the line, punching through sensor clusters. The scouts died without theatrics, their systems simply ceasing to function as their nodes went dark. The last of them tried to retreat into its crack. We nailed it halfway, its body wedged in the opening like a cork. I ordered no pursuit. Cutting them out would take time we did not have, and the crack might widen into a new tunneling path. Better to leave the corpse as an obstruction. We moved on, deeper into rock that felt more and more like a throat. The emergency vent shaft was exactly where the old schematics said it would be, though time had not been kind. Its mouth yawned at the end of a short, downward-sloping tunnel, lined with corroded metal. A circular opening, 4 meters across, dropping into a dark vertical that my suit's ranging LiDAR mapped as a long descent broken by debris ledges. Originally, it had connected to a network of ducts designed to equalize pressure between deep galleries and the surface. At some point, someone had deemed that function unnecessary and sealed most of it off. The shaft's current purpose was to accumulate dust and forgotten things. We needed it to accumulate one more. The lip was jagged, the metal lining warped. The vault's bulk barely fit within the circle. Its damaged legs scraped sparks as we maneuvered it into position, 3 functional limbs braced around the hole. My suit's servos strained as I helped guide its mass, acting as a lever and counterweight. The plan was simple. We would push the vault into the shaft, allowing it to descend under controlled slide until it lodged on a structural narrowing 20 meters below. Our suits were not rated for that kind of descent. The vault, however, was built to survive impacts and shock loads. We had 18 minutes left when the next tremor hit. This one was different in character. Not the localized grind of a tunneler or the distant rumble of general bombardment. It was a sharp, clean jolt, followed by a sustained, low-frequency vibration that rattled my teeth and made my vision blur for a heartbeat. The first rod had impacted somewhere within Delta 7's grid square. The timer adjusted for the new reality, recalculating based on observed arrivals. The expected window narrowed. 17 minutes. The squad began final positioning. 2 suits braced behind the vault, using their exoskeletons' full strength to push. I positioned myself at the side, ready to shove the vault's center of mass into line if it started to twist. The 4th suit moved to the opposite side to mirror my force. The vault's legs retracted partially, lowering its body toward the shaft. Mechanical groans echoed in the tunnel as joints protested. At my signal, the others pushed. The vault slid. Its front edge tipped over the lip, weight shifting. For one moment it hung in balance, then its mass tilted decisively, and it began to fall. We rode it only for a fraction of a second, using the initial momentum to guide its path. Then we disengaged. Mag clamps released. Servos flared to counteract sudden emptiness. The vault disappeared below us in a cloud of rust flakes and dust, its armored back scraping the shaft walls with a sound like tearing metal sheets. My suit's sensors tracked its descent until the signal attenuated, then spiked when its mass struck the narrowing and lodged. The entire shaft shuddered. The impact jolted debris loose from the ceiling of the access tunnel. Rocks and chunks of lining rained down. One particularly heavy fragment hit the 4th suit square in the helmet. His icon flickered, then went dark. Brain case penetration. Death instantaneous. 3 suits now, not counting mine. 4, if you included the vault, which did not care and did not count. I moved to the edge of the shaft and peered down. My lights painted the vault's top, wedged at an angle, its legs folded uselessly beneath it. One of its casings had dented from the impact, but the status feed through my hardline connection showed no core breach. Its innards were intact, power cycling into low-draw mode to preserve integrity. I should have fallen back then, hauled the remaining suits out of the tunnel, and tried to make for the nearest point outside the grid. We had done what we could for the vault. Our mission technically ended with its relative safety. I did not give that order because the choir chose that moment to arrive in force. The first sign was a faint, rising whine from behind us in the corridor we had just traversed. It came layered over the ambient rumble of the planet, too high for some ears, but my suit's pickups translated it into a clear threat marker. Patterns in the noise matched synodic drone movement, a combined unit of mid-weight harvesters and accompanying scouts. Their route overlapped ours. They had followed the trail of broken rock, scattered slugs, and heat signatures we had left behind. We turned as one, weapons up. The corridor behind glowed red in our HUDs as the first line of harvesters rounded a bend, their front segments studded with cutting arms, their bodies heavier and more armored than the scouts we had killed earlier. Behind them, smaller constructs flickered, sensor relays, target designators. The combined unit was large enough to matter, small enough that destroying it would still take more time than we had. They advanced without hesitation. They had our positions, our temperatures, our chemical signatures. They had the shaft's geometry mapped in real time through their own sensors. They saw the vault embedded below and evaluated its capture potential. The timer ticked down. 14 minutes. We opened fire at maximum sustainable rate. In a corridor that narrow, with walls that close, recoil management is crucial. I planted my boots, anchored my back against the shaft's lip, and let the exosuit's assistance soak the force. Slugs hammered into the leading harvesters. Fragments of composite shell flew. One harvester lost two of its primary arms and continued forward, dragging them, adapting its gait in microseconds. The squad's fire cut down the first wave, but more poured in from behind. The choir had dedicated real resources to this vector. Perhaps they had correlated the presence of registry vaults with human resistance patterns. Perhaps this was routine. We fell back step by step, keeping the shaft at our side. The harvesters advanced over their own wreckage, claws and feeds clicking on metal. Cutting beams lashed out, scoring the walls and our armor. My left forearm plate glowed orange where one beam skated across it, eating through outer layers. Suit temperature warnings intensified. Environmental seals held, barely. One of the remaining suits went down when a harvester's mandibles clamped around his left leg, crushing it at the knee and dragging him off balance. He tried to cut himself free with his wrist torch, but another harvester piled on, and then another, swallowing him beneath mechanized limbs. His icon went from blue to gray without fanfare. The rest of us kept firing. There is no room for extraction attempts when the line is collapsing. You hold until it cannot be held, and then you fall back, or you are counted among the fallen. The second suit fell to a different threat. The ground beneath him simply gave way. A secondary fissure opened, undermined by smaller tunneling scouts. His weight punched through, and he vanished into darkness with a half-uttered grunt, cut short by impact. His icon did not reappear. I found myself alone on the tunnel floor, with the shaft at my side, the vault below, and a wall of metal insects advancing. The rods impacted again above us. The shockwave this time was stronger. Dust cascaded from the ceiling in sheets. A structural support beam near the tunnel's midpoint shifted, its base cracking. My HUD painted stress vectors in angry colors. Decision time. I could hold the corridor for a few more minutes, taking down as many harvesters as possible, and then be buried with them when the rods reached our depth. Or I could force a collapse now, denying the choir the shaft and the vault. I had one asset left that could shape the battlefield meaningfully, my exosuit's power core and explosive yield if deliberately breached. I moved back to the shaft's edge, putting my body between the vault's position below and the main mass of advancing machines. The harvesters, sensing proximity to their objective, accelerated. Cutting beams intensified, flaring brighter in the dust. My armor shrieked as they scored it, layers failing one by one. I triggered the charges on my remaining shape charges and set them along the tunnel's ceiling, right at the point where the structural beam had shifted. The suit's assistance made the movements fast, despite my injuries. My breath echoed loud in my ears, each inhale a rasp, each exhale a wheeze. The charges alone might not bring down the tunnel. The rods would do the rest soon enough, but I could not rely on timing. I needed immediate collapse, so I authorized a core overload. The suit's power unit was not designed to explode, it was designed to fail safe. But any concentrated energy source can be coaxed into violence if you are determined enough. I bypassed 3 safety interlocks with override codes most infantry never learn, drew down the input limits on the regulator, and set a short timer. 7 seconds. Enough to trigger the charges and throw myself toward the shaft, using the last reserves of servo power to carry me out of the direct blast radius. Not enough to think much about anything. I thumbed the detonator. The charges blew first, punching jagged holes into the ceiling and shattering the already overstressed beam. Cracks raced through the rock like lightning. Fragments fell, crushing the first rank of harvesters. Dust filled the air, turning my visor's view into a monochrome snowstorm. Then the core went. For a brief instant, my entire world became white. Not light exactly, but overloaded sensor input. The suit shut down non-essential optics to preserve my eyes. Pressure punched into me from behind, a brutal hand smashing me forward. I felt my body leave the floor, sail over the shaft's lip, and collide with the far wall before sliding down into rubble. Consciousness went somewhere dark and distant for an unknown interval. When it came back, there was silence. The suit's emergency systems rebooted in survival mode. Most combat functions remained offline. Mobility systems were at zero. Both leg actuators read as absent, not just damaged. Environmental seals reported compromise but partial integrity. Oxygen reserves had dropped to their current estimate, 41 minutes. My torso was pinned under a mass of rock and metal. Movement below the waist was non-existent and unnecessary. My arms could still move within limited arcs, enough to reach the maintenance jack and connect to the vault. The shaft around me had partially collapsed. The tunnel above was a compacted mass of stone and fused metal, blocking line of sight and, more importantly, line of approach for anything that did not have weeks to dig. Below, the vault status pinged steady in my HUD. Structural stress within tolerances. Core online in low power mode. Data intact. The harvester's signals were gone, either destroyed in the collapse or blocked by the mass between us. The choir would need to re-triangulate, probe anew, dig from another vector. That would take time, and time is a resource even machines must account for. Above all of us, the rods continued to fall. Each impact transmitted as a deep, distant thud, like the planet's final heartbeats. They would shatter the upper structures, vaporize what remained of the trench city, vitrify streets and galleries. Down here, the shock would be less direct, but still severe. Some of the cracks in the shaft widened by micrometers with each strike. My suit registered those and added them to stress maps I no longer needed. I logged the mission as partially successful. Payload preserved. Escort unit lost. Enemy penetration delayed. After that, there was nothing left to do but record this. I think of the squad now only in abstract terms. 8 icons reduced to 1. Their names drift at the edge of recall, attached to faces my brain no longer has the bandwidth to reconstruct. In the end, we all become data in somebody's registry. Killed in action. Body not recovered. Assets expended. Up above, someone authorized Grid Delta 7's sterilization. Maybe they knew we were still down here. Maybe their map showed only red and no blue, only hostile vectors and an unmarked hollow where we now lie. The decision was clean in their logic. Deny the choir another prize, cut off a contaminated limb to save the torso. From where I am penned, it makes a cold kind of sense. I do not feel betrayed, I feel consistent. The war has always been like this on Kepri 9. You spend bodies to buy time. You spend time to move matter. You move matter to keep the data flowing and the machines guessing. Somewhere far from here, other grids fight their own unwinnable engagements. Registry cores walk on their iron legs through other burning worlds. The choir learns, we adapt, the calculus changes, and the sum remains the same. My breathing is louder now. The suit's environmental systems whisper to compensate. Oxygen ticked down to 20 minutes while I was talking. The pain in my ribs crept back as the auto-injectors reached the end of their controlled doses. The world around my visor's narrow view became a tunnel within a tunnel, focus shrinking to the beam of light on the vault's curved back and the swirling dust motes that dance there. Sometimes I feel vibration through the rock that does not match the rhythm of the rods. Short, localized tremors, as if something is moving in a parallel shaft. It could be Synodic scouts edging their way around the collapse. It could be human rescue teams following garbled pings. It could be the planet settling into a new configuration after so much energy has been dumped into it. I have no way to know. I choose, for now, to treat those tremors as irrelevant. My role in this battle is over. I sealed our vector. I wedged the registry core in a place that will take effort to reach. My last useful contribution is to leave this record tied to its maintenance channel. If someone recovers the vault, they will see the log and know that Grid Delta 7 was not surrendered without cost. If no one does, the data will sit here until entropy or tunneling drones erase it. Either way, the past hours will have had the same net effect on the war's sums. A slight alteration in probabilities, a minor delay in the choir's assimilation of our patterns. My lungs ache. Each breath rattles. The suit's medical subroutines want to sedate me. I deny the command. Consciousness is preferable. There is a clarity in these last minutes that I have not felt in years of deployment. I think, briefly, of the surface. I have only been up there twice in my life, in full environmental armor, stepping out onto the storm-scoured rim just long enough to mark the difference between the artificial twilight below and the seething half-light above. The sky was a smear of ochre and black, clouds shredded by constant winds. Dust hissed against my visor, leaving fine etchings. The Terminator line was a band of permanent dusk, no stars visible through the atmospheric filth. Somewhere beyond that sky, ships still maneuver. Mass drivers coil and uncurl. The war continues in layers I will never see. That is appropriate. Infantry do not need the full picture. We need only our grid squares and our orders. The oxygen indicator turns yellow. 10 minutes. My voice grows rougher. The recording quality may suffer. It does not matter. The essentials are already captured. Breach on F-113. Loss of half the squad in initial collapse. Crippling of Vault 12. Route deviation through maintenance galleries. Observation of Vault 9's harvest. Authorization of Grid Delta 7. Sterilization. Deviation again to emergency vent shaft. Contact with Scout Harvester Unit. Engagement and neutralization. Insertion of Vault 12 into shaft. Structural wedging confirmed. Arrival of Harvester Formation. Deliberate tunnel collapse via suit core overdrive and charges. Current pin state, vault integrity verified. Everything else is commentary. I wonder, dimly, if the choir records its own failures in similar fashion. Some subroutine in its vast structure, cataloging lost units and failed harvests. There is a symmetry in that thought. A machine intelligence and a human soldier both logging the same engagement in different languages. Perhaps one day someone will compare the two and find meaning in the overlap. That is philosophy, which I am not supposed to indulge. I discard it. The tremors through the rock grow fainter. Either the rods are finishing their pattern or my senses are dulling. The dust motes in the beam in front of me seem to move more slowly, as if the air itself is thickening. My hands feel distant, heavy. The suit's haptics have become a faint buzz rather than a tactile map. Oxygen warns in red. 5 minutes. There is a temptation to speak last words. Some declaration, some summary of belief or regret. I resist it. War strips that kind of flourish away. What remains is simpler. Did you hold the line as far as you could? Did you move the thing that needed moving? Did you make the enemy spend more than they gained? We did that today, I think. The registry core is there just below, silent and heavy, full of names and patterns the choir will not have, at least not yet. That is enough for one grid. The dust continues its slow dance in the light. My vision narrows further, vignetting around the edges. The HUD elements seem to drift, untethered. Audio compresses into a distant hum. If someone hears this, log it. Mark Grid Delta 7 as contested to the last. Note that Registry Vault 12 was preserved in Shaft Delta 7 vent, depth approximately 20 meters. Send the squad's designations up the chain. Attach this recording to their files. The rest is silence and stone. My breath shortens. The indicator flashes its final warning. Somewhere, beyond this narrow space, machines and men still fight. I am no longer among them. I end the recording now. That concludes tonight's tale. The engines throttle down to a soft, steady pulse. Enough to hold you gently in place. Rest there as long as you need.